Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to the webinar that we are hosting today to celebrate World Environment Day in 2021. After having three back-to-back sessions on the economy and the moral aspects and the global concerns about global environmental change, this session would be focusing on the social impact of waste and its governance. And I'm quite proud and excited to be listening to my co-panelists in this session. And we have quite a few, all of them being women, so that makes me very proud. But also talking about waste from different lenses and understanding waste in a much more broader as a much more broader concept, and understanding the different facets of how waste can be managed and how it relates with our nature, with the environment, and with the culture in which we live. Most of the presentations would be focusing on the context in India and with some examples from our work in the case of Dr. Neha. But let me just first begin with the introduction. The order for today's presentation, we have Professor Mimi Roy. She is going to be talking about waste management in the Indian context. She is a professor of environmental studies and assistant dean of international collaboration at the Jindal School of Liberal Arts and Humanities. She is also the co-director for the Center for Environment, Sustainability and Human Development at JGU. Dr. Roy has a PhD in environmental sciences from the University of West Virginia and has worked as a postdoctoral research scholar at Texas A&M University. Before joining JGU, Dr. Roy was working as a research fellow at Auburn University, USA. She teaches courses on environmental sustainability at JSLH. And mostly her work focuses on gender, climate change, sustainable agriculture, waste management, and health impacts from environmental contamination. She has been awarded the Sigma Best Researcher Award for her research on selenium contamination in the coal mines of West Virginia, and has several international publications and press media which focus and highlight her important research. Dr. Mimi, over to you. I'll introduce the speakers as they come. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Krishnan, for the lovely introduction. And thank you, the Jindal School of Environment and Sustainability, for hosting this important seminar today. For us who work on the environment, every day is an environment day for us. We try to, work on some issues of the environment, every moment. That's life to us. That's another form of life to us. But to commemorate this special day and to remind all people that that there's a special need to care for the environment more now. Thank you for organizing this very important webinar today. Thank you to all the all the panelists here today. I have been listening since morning, and very inspiring discussions, talks that have been that we have all been listening to. So I will start my presentation. So I'm going to talk about waste management in terms of the Indian context. Now, before I go to this special this topic, I want to also highlight what has been reiterated a couple of times in today's various sessions, that there's science which works on several issues. There's technological advancement, but when we are working on sustainable development, and the three pillars of sustainable development, as we know, is the planet, the economy, and the society. So these three things have to go hand in hand, and it's a completely an interdisciplinary field where people from different disciplines needs to merge together and give us the solutions at this moment to work and protect our environment. The waste has become a very crucial point right now because of the exploding population that we are seeing, and also the amount of the consumption, the production patterns. Everything of each of those aspects are related to waste. When we look at the Sustainable Development Goals, SDG 12 talks about responsible, sustainable consumption and production, which is a kind related to waste management. It's sustainable sustainable consumption and production, where all countries need to take action, with the developed countries showing us the pathway in terms of infrastructural developments, in terms of technological advancement, in terms of capacity building, and working hand in hand towards with the developing countries. So it's also kind of goal SDG number 17, which talks about partnership for the different goals, and working hand in hand. So the developed countries as the developing countries needs to come together and work hand in hand to solve this critical problem that we are this has been a very critical problem in the last 2 decades, I would say, and especially in India, because of the kind of waste that we are generating, the amount of waste we are generating, the way we are disposing our waste. So waste management is a very important very important aspect of the environment right now to deal with. And with urbanization, the issues of waste management kinds of proliferates. We know, according to the 2011 census, we have 1.2 billion people in India, which is already moved to 1.32 billion people right now. And gradually we are shifting from a rural to an urban society. By 2031, we know that about 600 million Indians will be residing in the urban areas, which brings up issues of slum areas, the semi-urban areas, and how are we going to manage issues of settlements, manage issues of waste, manage issues of livelihood opportunities. All these questions comes up with the issue of urbanization. And urban environmental management is very crucial in terms of the population growth, in terms of the livelihood opportunities, industrialization, the lifestyle changes, the newer technologies, which brings new challenges. So with all this urban environmental management comes the issue of waste management. So if we talk about the different types of waste that we are dealing with in the 21st century, this is just a cartoon showing the major kinds of waste that we are dealing with are the municipal solid waste, the industrial waste, the hazardous waste, the e-waste, plastic waste, biomedical waste. Biomedical waste is especially important now because of the pandemic. We are creating a lot of biomedical waste. We are creating a lot of single use plastic waste now because of the pandemic. We all know we are using disposable gloves, we are using PPE kits, a lot of medical instruments, which are creating a lot more waste than what we anticipated. The pandemic itself is creating way more waste than what we had anticipated. So it's very important now to talk about how are we going to manage this kind of waste. If you look at the future waste trends in India, it shows that right now in the 2021 we have about 101 million metric tons waste produced per year, which would go to about 436 million metric tons by 2050. So we are looking at a 4 times more waste production in the next 2-3 decades. And how are we going to manage it? Are landfills the solution? We know that landfills is not a sustainable solution. Yes, landfill is a solution, but it is probably not the most sustainable solution that we can think of, because landfills comes with its own issues. Landfill comes with issues of methane generation, which causes greenhouse gas emissions. Landfill comes with issues of various kinds of diseases, various kinds of pests, animals, health hazards. So and also the issue of land. With more and more people moving towards urban areas, where do we have the land to accommodate landfills? How do we construct a sustainable landfill that does not leach into the soil, into the water? How do we handle those issues? So one of the major issues with landfills is obviously what I said, the land requirement. Where do we have the land? If you look at this graph, it says that if it goes from 2011 to 2050, and we will see that in 2011 between 2011 and 2050, there's a 7 times more requirement of land that we need for landfills in order to dispose our waste. But we clearly know that that kind of availability of land is difficult for our country. We cannot and even if we have land resources, we have to allocate them to much much bigger issues like settlements, like industries. So for landfills, we really don't have that amount of land available. So that's a very big issue right now. Apart from the issue that landfills itself are, creates a lot of health hazards, creates greenhouse gas pollution, creates a lot of urban violence. So all those issues are already there. So there have been, different agencies who have been talking about managing the solid waste that are generated. And I have listed here some of the agencies that are working actively towards this role. The central ministry, we have the Ministry of Environment, Forestry and Climate Change working over here. We have Ministry of Urban Development who works in this, Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, Ministry of Finance, the central ministries. Then we have the state ministries who work hand in hand with the central agencies, the urban local bodies who also works in cooperation with the central and state agencies, private NGOs, the informal sector. Informal sector is very important, as you know, when we talk about waste, because the waste sector is still predominantly guided by the informal sector. It's not a formalized sector yet, though the government of India is pushing towards making more people move from the informal sector to the formal sector in terms of waste management. But it's not an easy shift, because this has been in our society for centuries, and so that shift towards informal to a formal sector is not really very easy. Then there are other institutions who are also working on waste management, like the Niti Aayog, the Department of Economic Affairs, the National Institute of Urban Affairs, the Bhabha Atomic Research Center, who are working towards biogas plants and different technologies for providing sustainable solutions to waste management. There are also industry associations like the ASSOCHAM, the FICCI. So these are all the agencies that are working together in India right now to solve the problem of waste management. And also there are when we talk about private and NGOs, it's also the academics, the researchers who are devoting their time and their resources towards coming up with all kinds of solutions towards how to manage this thing sustainably. So when I talk about, I just want to focus a little bit about some specific kinds of waste in India. And when we talk about waste, we know that plastic waste is something that if we don't talk about, we have to talk about plastic waste. You all know that that this is a huge problem throughout the global. It's a global problem. The plastic waste is a global problem. If you look at India, they consume about 11 kg of plastic per year per capita, which is one of the lowest rates in the world. If you compare it with the US, their rate is about 10 times more than what we consume. That's about 109 kg per year per capita. So, but with the rate of population explosion that we are predicting, this rate is set to increase to about 22 million tons by next year, and it's probably going to increase more because of the pandemic and because of the more the huge amount of plastic waste that we are actually creating right now. India generates about 3.3 million metric tons of waste per year, and according to reports, it says that about 60% of waste in India is currently recycled. If you look at the global data, globally the data says that about 9% of the global plastic waste is recycled. But is in terms of the Indian this report from the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, Government of India, and according to this report, the 60% of plastic waste in India is recycled. If 60%, now my question is, if 60% of plastic waste in India is recycled, then why do we have these issues of so much of plastic waste? We see it everywhere. We see it in the landfills, we see it in the water bodies, we see it in the around us. In everywhere we have plastic waste. So the important question is, if we try to disentangle this word plastic and look at the plastic politics here, because it's not only about what it's it's about what kind of plastic is being recycled, who is recycling it, who have the ability to do this kind of recycling, and the economics of recycling. We know that in India, if it's not very easy for us to have the option of recycle. A lot of people, even people in metro areas, always don't, even if they want to, the option of going and recycling a product is not that easy. It's not something that is at our doorstep right now. It's not an easy option for us. So that is something that we will have to about think of. When we talk about plastic waste, we know that in 2019 on Gandhiji's birthday, our Prime Minister Mr. Modi, he asked India to kind of phase out of single-use plastics by 2024. Now, the government of India has already rescinded that statement because saying that it's not economically feasible to phase out of single-use plastics by now. So, but it is something that we will have to do sooner or later, because otherwise this problem is of plastic pollution is going to be persistent. you know um, but one thing is that when the government is talking about phasing out single use plastics or phasing out waste segregation, we have to keep in mind that the waste management systems in India mostly thrive on a pool of unorganized informal labor sector, which who are untrained and unaware. Most of them, as I spoke earlier, it's a completely informal sector. No training, no awareness, no training about what kind of health hazards it is, no training, no safety equipments, no PPE kits. So without standardization and setting up context relevant protocols, we need to have robust institutional governance. Without those things, there's little opportunity to transform the entire system, as it is often unique to each community, village, or city. So in India, it's very unique to which community you are in, which village you are in, which city you are in, which part of India you are in. So without a robust institutional governance, it's very difficult to control plastic waste in India. So I will talk about a case study which is taken up by UNDP and the Hindustan Coca-Cola Beverages Private Limited and the Hindustan Unilever Limited. They are working on plastic waste management in India. This project started in January 2018, and it's supposed to go till 2024. And the main aim of this project is to convert waste into resources. That's where I'm going to shift my presentation towards that part, because now we have to think how we can gain from the waste that we are creating. So to gain from the waste we are creating, we have to use them as some form of resources. So we have to, so this project, this special project, which is in collaboration with UNDP, the Hindustan Unilever Limited, and the Coca-Cola Beverages Private Limited, they are trying to create a socio-technological model based on community mobilization. They are thinking about moving plastic waste management from the informal to the formal sector. So how are they doing it? They are kind of trying to establish material recovery centers, which are also known as Swachhata Kendras. They're trying to establish the Swachhata Kendras for sustained practices of waste management. They are trying to institutionalize this Swachhata Kendras, which means to formalize them, having a structured framework and improve socio-economic conditions of these workers, and moving them towards the formal sector. Develop technology supported awareness. They are even trying to do cloud-based traceability, accountability, digital governance. All this is in the cards for this program. They are also trying to create a waste value chain, trying to create waste to productive resources. This program is currently operational in 20 cities in India. There are about 22 material recovery centers and about 1,750 Safal Sathis, who are the Swachhata, the people who are being moved from the informal to the formal sector. We are calling them Safal Sathis. There are about 1,750 Safal Sathis who are already enrolled into this program. So it's a very good case study, and if it works, it's going to be miraculous. But as I said, the sector is completely informal. To completely transform it will take a lot of effort, a lot of financial backing, a lot of technological advancement, a lot of infrastructural support. And where are we going to get that is the next important question. So basically, when I talk about waste to resources, we are trying to talk about from an open economy to a circular economy. So we are going to move from open-ended economy, or from open-ended loop to a closed loop. So we are moving to a circular economy from a 3 hours to 4 hours, and now even we are talking about 5 hours. So basically, if you look at this hours, we all know about this hours. Reduce, refuse, reuse, recycle, recovery. Those are the most favored options for the 4 hours, and the least favored option is the landfill. It's an option which you don't want to take. It's your last option. But if we can move from the 3 to the 4 to the 5 hours, that's where we are aiming towards. So there are some issues and challenges with waste management. Obviously, there's some policy and regulatory issues. This waste management is completely governed by the Municipal Solid Waste Management Rules of 2016. So all the types of waste that I previously showed you a slide about the different kind of waste that we are generating. Each of these waste is governed by the MSWM rules of 2016. These are regulatory framework, but not very good, not equipped with necessary clauses. So we need more clauses into it, more implementation of this framework. Also, there's not a very clear course of action for what kind of technologies we need to have access to, because if we are going to move towards circular economy, if we are going to move towards waste to resources, we definitely need access to latest technologies. So there's also no clear guidelines on waste to energy sector. So when we talk from waste to resources, one of the prominent ways of doing that is waste to energy. So there's no clear guidelines on that. Also, there's a financial challenges. As you know, it all involves a lot of money, and so we have to have PPPs, public private partnerships here, but we don't see enough participation from the private sector, not yet enough participation from the private sector to deal with this kind of advancements. But there, at the same time, there are opportunities. All these private sectors, the government agencies, the ULBs, the NGOs, the other institutions, they also understand that there are opportunities here. Waste to wealth is a completely new idea. Some developed countries have already adopted it. Sweden, Germany, they are doing it miraculously. They're 100% successful in converting waste to wealth. These are smarter, comprehensive systems. There's adequate risk management and risk sharing between stakeholders. That you already know what are the risks that you are encountering it. So but there's also a lot of opportunities there. There's also a huge market to serve. This is an investment of approximately 18 billion US dollars by 2030, probably going to about 100 billion dollars by 2050. So it's a huge market to serve out there. Huge market opportunities in the future. The two major ways of the two major markets here are composting and waste to energy initiatives. So these are the areas where the government of India is also financing a lot of projects, because they understand that's the future of waste management, that can generate a lot of opportunities in the field of waste management. So if we look at the kind of recommended expenses in the waste management sector, we'll see that the most of the money in this sector goes in the collection, storage, transportation, and most of it actually goes in the MSW processing. So how we are processing our waste, and that's a major challenge that we are still facing. Though we have investments in that sector, if you see the color connotations here, the orange is the government of India share, the deep orange, the lighter yellow is the state share, the brownish shade is a public private partnerships share, and the dark red is the required investment that we require. But you see that dark red bar is the most prominent bar, which means that there's dearth of required investments. We still need a lot of investments in different sectors to actually make this run successfully. But even in what we have, the MSW processing is the sector where we are investing the lot, and this processing is also involves how we are converting waste to wealth. So this is this sector where we are seeing the maximum amount of investments. Even if you look at this one, you will see that again there are three colors here. The
Yes,
light. Yes,
you're over time.
I'm over time.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, just give me 1 minute. I'll finish here. Yeah, so the waste to energy sector is the sector where we are investing the most amount of money. The government of India, the state governments, the public-private partnerships. That's the sector which is involving the most amount of money. So there's a task force on waste to energy that was set up in 2014 by the government of India, and the major points of this task force says that public-private partnership is the key to make this work. We should move from the 5 hours from the 3 hours, and we have to make this a decentralized project. Otherwise, it's not going to work. The waste to energy plants has certain advantages and disadvantages, which I have been speaking about, throughout the discussion. But I want to, bring one point here to your notice. One big disadvantage is why waste to energy plants are not very successful in India. That waste to energy plants are not very successful in India, and the major disadvantage is the kind of waste that we are generating. The kind of waste that we are generating has a high moisture content, is it low in calorific value, and it has a lot of other materials, which means that the Indian waste is not segregated. We know that most of the waste is unsegregated. It has a lot of organic waste in it, and when we put it into the waste to energy plants, it just does not work. So that's the reason why it has worked in the developed countries like Germany and Sweden, because the kind of waste that they deal with is different from the kind of waste that we in India deal with. So that's why our waste to energy plants are not very successful, and so we need to look after all this, and so there's a widespread criticism about it that probably this is probably we have to think it in a different way. We have tried to copy it from the developed countries, but we have not thought about the kind of waste that we generate, the kind of infrastructure we have. So this is something that that needs reconsideration, because there's a lot of opportunity in this sector of waste management. Okay, so thank you for listening to me. Thank you very much. If there are any questions, I will take them now or at the end, as the moderator suggests. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor. This was such a great introduction. I know it was tough to cover a lot of examples. It's such a big topic.
Yes.
But I think you've given a very nice introduction to our audience who's listening with us today. I would now take you all on a journey outside of India and have Professor Neha Khetrapal talk about an example from Malaysia. Dr. Neha Khetrapal is an assistant professor at Jindal Institute of Behavioural Sciences and serves as an assistant director for the Center for Community Mental Health. She holds a PhD in linguistics from Macquarie University, Australia. Before joining Jindal University, she has worked for several other universities and research centers in Germany, Singapore, and Hungary. She is broadly interested in understanding how human cognitive processing interacts with social factors to determine the quality of life for an individual or for societies at large. Her current focus is on applied domains, including political, social, and environmental psychology. She will be talking to us today about socially responsible waste management and will give examples from her research as well. So I'm quite excited to listen to her. And I would request the audience to please send us any questions that you may have, any suggestions, or how changes that you've made in your personal life in the comment section on YouTube. Professor Neha, over to you.
Thank you, Professor Krishnan. Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be a part of this platform, and it gives me immense pleasure to talk about the kind of research that I'm trying to push. So some of it is the kind of research that I would be presenting you today. Some of it is my idea, and the case study that I would be presenting to you all from Malaysia is actually based on a different research group that is working there in Malaysia. So please allow me to share my screen. So We've already heard Professor Roy talk about the distinction between several sort of waste that our society produces. We've heard her talk about solid waste, municipal waste, and industrial waste. So in this presentation, what I talk about is municipal waste rather broadly. So to refresh our memory, solid waste is basically a catch-all term that encompasses a wide variety of activities and practices that, in a sense, leads to the unwanted residues that we may not like to use as society. And basically, the municipal solid waste that I would be talking about today basically comes at large from hospitals, large business houses, even the smaller ones, schools, and our homes at large. So we already know Dr. Mimi gave us an introduction about how we talk about the organic waste, how we may think about segregating our waste. So all those issues are still relevant here while I present this interesting case study. So basically, when did it all start? Why were we all alarmed as a society concerning this huge spread of solid waste in the case of littering, as we all know? So it all started in early 19th century, basically because we didn't really know as a society, unfortunately, what to do with the sort of waste that we didn't want to use. And that was basically littered or basically was filling our landfills. It still does in many countries, but that unfortunately poses a problem for our public health. So we know that this is the unfortunate outcome of not being able to gracefully waste manage. So several societies in the early 19th century had littering as a common form of garbage disposal. So we all started off like that. Solid waste became a problem in the middle of the 19th century, basically with the growth of population and the industrial boom that we all witnessed. So basically, just to put it in one line, what started as a population explosion was eventually followed by another type of explosion, which we could now basically label garbage explosion, unfortunately. Sorry, it's not a nice term, but this is how alarming it is. And to show you the figures, these are the figures. So these are the figures that have been lifted from the World Bank. And basically, as you can see, that it's an old chart. So the predictions for 2016 basically match. But as you look at these figures and the country divisions that we see in this graph, it's sort of alarming. And as we go and cruise through 2050, it grows and grows. And you can see the share that is contributed by East Asia and Pacific. That's also sort of very alarming. So we really basically need to do something about it if we really want to give. As Professor Roy mentioned in her presentation, that there is a country-specific discrimination when it comes to the kind of waste that each of us are producing. So when we look at the high-income countries, what we basically see from the stats over there is that these countries generate relatively less food and green waste, but sort of they produce more dry waste that could be recycled. So that's good. But what's happening in the middle and low income countries? So these sort of countries generate food and green waste with the fraction of organic waste increasing as economic development levels tapers down or tapers off. So we could relate to this, I guess. And in low-income countries, materials that could be recycled account for only 20% of the waste stream. Now, this is alarming given what we could do with the waste that we produced. So basically, we have three things that we could do. We could either reduce the source of waste at the production cycle. We could either recycle our waste, or we could try composting our organic and food waste. Are we all doing it? That's the important question that we should think of. Well, with all that background literature in place, we really need to think about meeting the waste challenge that we have. So I sort of try to come up with two different panels that we could think of at this stage in time. So either we deal with we sort of cut down the waste at the production cycle itself, which basically we would label off as preventive measures, or we could think about reducing our waste by recycling or by composting. In this case, we would be really looking at the corrective measures. So which way would we like to go? That's the question we should ask as a society. So this brings us to the applied side of the things. Now, what I really want to do in the second part of my presentation is basically I want to talk about the bridges that I would like to draw between social psychology and how can work in social psychology and community psychology help us draw important practical implications as far as waste management is concerned. So here I sort of bring you to another interesting field, the field of religion. You may think, why religion? Well, there is a point here, and a very important point that maybe we would like to look at. There is growing acknowledgement in the literature that religion can play an effective role in protecting the world's ecological system, and this sort of acknowledgement comes from our philosophical studies. So religious belief is basically seen as a powerful force to create purpose transformations by transmitting ecologically positive habits of practice and attitudes to our succeeding generations. So what is the idea here? The idea is much more powerful when one considers that more than half of the world's population embraces some sort of religious belief. So when more than half of the world population is sort of embracing some sort of religious belief, irrespective of the kind of belief that they embrace, maybe that's a powerful tool that we could basically use to tackle waste management. But then it's just not as easy as we could like to think. So there are different levels in this hierarchy before we could actually connect religious studies, community psychology, and waste management challenge. So basically this graph grows not top up, but bottom down. So what determines our higher or the highest level of adoption when it comes to recycling or when it comes to composting? So if we look at this hierarchy, and if we would like to use religion as a tool in this exercise, then we have to keep certain things in mind. We have to ensure that the people who are actually demonstrating in real time how to do recycling or even how to do composting, are they themselves knowledgeable? We should think of this at the back end before we go into the field. Whether these are the people who have the power to persuade the people at large, irrespective of the religious community that these people are coming from. Are they holding the power to basically sway people's decision to adopt recycling or to adopt composting? And how easy it becomes in that sort of social scenario that all of these members of the general public are going to implement all of these measures, and then finally confirmation. Now, I take a case study, a very interesting case study from Malaysia, the state of Selangor. Now, why do I move away from India and talk about Selangor, Malaysia? So this, the country and specifically the state of Selangor is very, very multicultural and multi-ethnic. We look at the statistics here, okay, 61% of the people in this particular state practice Islam, but then there are other people such as Buddhists, we have people following Christianity and Hinduism. So we have a variety of religion there. And how can we convince all of these people? Of course, we can all imagine, and it's easy to understand that people following different religious beliefs would also come with a different sort of social background. How should we break the ice that sort of cuts across all of these people in a uniform manner? That's the challenge, I guess, that goes along with the waste management challenge. And then there are other people, people belonging to different sort of faiths, different sort of minority religious sects. So the case studies are basically located in this state, and there is a catch here. So all of these people who participated in this sort of interesting exercise come from high and middle income groups. So we must keep in mind, as we saw in the first part of the presentation, that the kind of waste that these high and middle income groups might generate would be a little bit different from the kind of the nature of the waste that people from low income groups would generate. But this is all good to begin with as an initial exercise, I guess. And another aspect to keep in mind before I go here is that the state of Selangor has the highest amount of solid waste generation. So that's the challenge that we go, and we need to just sort of build bridges across these two domains. So here is the study. So basically, it didn't really start off as a research study, but it started off as a community exercise. So we could see that all of these members or all of these sects of these communities, followers of Hinduism, followers of Islam, Christianity, and Buddhism, they started off with the recycling exercise. And what they did as a part of their community recycling exercise is most of them basically placed recycling bins right within the premises where people went either to mingle with the community for religious ceremonies or just as a place of worship. So you can imagine if people are actually spending a lot of time in all of these places, then how important it becomes to target these places when we really have to spread awareness as far as recycling is concerned. Then we remember the sort of graph that I showed to you before, like a few slides ago. We have to really deal with this matter at different levels of the hierarchy. So it's just not enough to place the recycling bins over there, but sort of give these people some sort of intrinsic or extrinsic motivation so that they are motivated to participate in these sort of recycling exercises. So these sort of communities, they came up with intrinsic motivation exercises. Some of them said that, okay, all of the proceeds that we get from the recycling would either go into building further places of worship, or probably we would be using these proceeds to help other non-privileged members of the society. And it's our moral responsibility that comes from the philosophical sphere to sort of live a spiritual lifestyle, to sort of lead a spiritual lifestyle, and to leave behind a good example for the other generations. So you could see that these members of the society were tackling this problem at different levels of the hierarchy, not just one, as we may like to think, okay, we just place the green bins or the red bins and that does the task. I guess that's probably not going to be successful. So through this exercise, if we want to make it more successful, the idea is to foster more cross-domain partnership between different sects or the levels of the society. So what's more important for a society? Maybe it's more true in a context like Malaysia. If we want to basically lift this study and sort of do this in another religious context, we may have to sort of twist and turn different features of it. But I guess more or less the exercise would remain the same. So what are we trying to do is we are potentially highlighting the role of religious communities in recycling, and we are trying to emphasize that their role goes beyond general idealisms on the positive influence of religious values and ethics. So basically, we are just trying to tell the world that these religious values and ethics play a much higher role. And then unique institutional element of each community is also making its way if we want to have this as a very successful exercise. We have to show that the local governmental bodies also sort of give their backing, and other members of the community also would like to play a part. So I guess if we sort of pay our attention to all of these interconnecting dots, then I guess we would have had a successful recycling drive or a compost drive. That's all from my side. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor. I think this was a very exciting case study to understand how religion can take us back to our roots and help us reestablish a connection with nature and with consumption and things that we acquire. It's very interesting. We would love to hear more from you. I think in the sense, there is one comment that has come up, and either Professor Mimi or yourself, you can take this on. There's a comment that says that organic farming, one of the measures that can be taken, is actually quite time consuming. And the use of organic farming, which was discussed in the previous session, also needs to be impressed upon the farmers. The question about how to do it effectively and connecting it to the discussions that we've had on social and policy impact, as well as personal attitudes and cultural beliefs. I think if you can, either of you can take a comment on that, and then we move on to Professor Ricki.
So if I may, yeah. So organic farming, yes, it's a time consuming thing. It takes time to see the benefits of what you have what you have reaped actually in organic farming. It's not something that you boom give a lot of fertilizers, apply a lot of fertilizers, apply a lot of pesticides, and you just increase your yields. Organic farming unfortunately has those constraints where you cannot it has to be, you cannot apply those kind of fertilizers and pesticides. It takes time for the soil to kind of rejuvenate itself and give you the benefits of that. So yeah, so for farmers to incentivize farmers to adopt organic farming, it's actually the government who needs to give subsidies. The farmers need more subsidies. They need to have proper training, proper awareness as to how organic farming works, what are the benefits. It's not only that you your yields, it's not that your yields are going to suffer. Yeah, it might be for 1 or 2 years, and that's those first 2-3 years that the government needs to support them, either through government funding or PPPs. But then after 3-4 years, when your land is actually ready for that for that organic farming initiative, for when your land is ready, you will really see that benefit. So yes, you have to actually incentivize the farmers, and there are a couple of ways that can be done. I am personally involved in a project at JGU where we are working with the local community, where we are working with the local farmers to incentivize them to talk them more into organic farming. Unfortunately, because of the pandemic, that project is at a halt right now. But yes, that's what I can say. It's a time taking process, and it needs patience.
Thank you so much. Professor Neha, if you have anything to add.
Oh, well, I mean, it's not an answer, but rather a post comment, like sort of post reflection. I was wondering if we had more of social incentives for the farmers that might also help along with knowledge incentives or along with financial incentives. I guess that would do the trick as well.
Yes, sure. I agree completely.
Thank you so much. We'll have a much more detailed Q&A after Professor Ricki's presentation, but we had some few minutes, so I thought we could engage with this comment. Let me now move on to our next speaker, who is Professor Ricki Levi, who is also faculty at JSES. She is completing her PhD in the Department of Environmental Studies at Tel Aviv University. Her research is actually drawing upon the fields of Indian and Western environmental ethics and focuses on Anupam Mishra's work on traditional water system to address current theoretical and practical environmental global challenges. She has conducted several interviews with Indian environmental scholars and activists, several of them known to the audience here. And her results have been published in several conferences and workshops in Israel, India, Germany, in journals like Transscience, a journal for global studies. And she's also written chapters in several books on global water ethics and epistemologies of water in Asia, if any of our audience is interested in reading. She is also undertaking research at Porter School of Environmental Studies in Tel Aviv University and in Israel's National Natural Resources Assessment Program. Professor Ricki, over to you, if you want to share your screen. Apologies about the...
Of course. Thank you very much, and greetings, and it's wonderful to join you here from Israel. So I want to offer for this my angle as being, I'm specifying in environmental ethics. So I want to offer basically a view, or if you want, a few philosophical reflection on the notion of waste. And I want to present two different angles on waste as a concept. So from one angle, if we will observe waste as the outcome of the modernist, anthropocentric, industrialist angle or approach to nature, we can see how waste is the outcome of the creation of numerous environmental and social problems. On the other hand, if we will observe waste from an ecological perspective, from the logic of nature, if you want to call it in this manner, we can view waste as a spectrum for a wide spectrum for rejuvenation, for renewal, for cleansing and healing of not just the economic and not just the ecological, ecosystem, but also for the social and economic dimension as well. So if we kind of start, when the environmental crisis started to be acknowledged in the early 60s and 70s of the early century, some of its main prophets, if you want, whether it was Rachel Carson with her book Silent Spring, who kind of really emphasizes the role of the Green Revolution, the process of the industrialization of agriculture as a main cause for climate change, or whether it was Paul Ehrlich in the Population Bomb, kind of emphasizing the role of demographic growth, or whether it was Barry Commoner, for example, in his work, The Closing Circle, where he kind of emphasize the role of the introducing of thousands of new synthetic material into the cycle of matter as the main cause for climate change. I think that the common denominator of the three of them is that all of them were biologists. All of them were observing nature, observing the way nature works and operates, and try to imply this logic on the understanding of why we are basically in the midst of such an unprecedented climate change. And I want to use one of Barry Commoner's main argument when he basically says and argues that what we have done mainly since the Industrial Revolution is change in a fundamental way our relationship to the matter. We change the course of matter and change it into what he refers to as a linear course of matter, because everything we use, whether it is clothes or foods or houses or cars, whatever it is, comes from nature. I designate it here as trees, but of course it can be any other natural resource as well. And that natural resources is being shifted to the factory and the goods are being produced. And we usually as humans or consumers meet the matter in the shape of the goods that we consume, and the residue of this matter is what we refer to as waste. But he says if we will look on nature and we observe that basically in nature and now nature work, for example, this orange tree, so some of them we take and we eat and consume, but some of them fall on the ground and become food for all these different organisms. So when we observe the way nature works and operates, we really understand that there isn't any kind of notion of waste, because waste in one certain part of the ecosystem is basically a source of food, a source of energy for different kind of organisms. And if we will not interrupt this cycle of matter, we basically can have an eternal system or eternal circulation of matter. And this is exactly the logic that was very much embraced in various different branches in environmentalism. I want to show one, I think, quite interesting example that kind of really refers to the field of economics, for example, in Kenneth Baldwin's famous article where he calls the economics of cargo and spaceships, where he refers to human awareness or human consciousness in modernity as one that is really refers like the cowboys in the Wild West. We have this kind of sense we're just riding on our horses. We feel that everything is just there for us to pick. We have a sense of endless natural resources that we can use in a disposable manner, just throw it away because we feel that we have endless resources that we can use. But this is, says Baldwin, is an illusion, and we are much more similar to astronaut that lives in a spaceship. And I think that astronaut in a spaceship, the sense of the scarce place is very, very evident. They know that they are dependent with one another. They know that they need to cooperate with one another in order to survive. Everything that they use, the matter, whether it is water or air or food, everything has to be used in a very, very moderate way. So I think that this kind of attitude, says Baldwin, this is the genuine reality of humanity on planet Earth, especially today, that we need to shift to this kind of awareness or this kind of consciousness. And I want to refer to it as a kind of a process of sanctifying the matter. And sanctifying the matter, I think, is something that really exists in numerous Indian traditions. And I want to offer, maybe we can look on Jainism, for example, as presenting a spaceship consciousness. And I think that the lifestyle that derives from the ethics of Ahimsa and other principles as well, but the concept of Ahimsa, which is established that it is not just non-violence, it's an active participation or in compassion of being aware to our dependence in nature, independence in the world, really demonstrate how nature, our natural element is being perceived in a very meticulous way, that we need to use resources in a moderate way. We need to bring back, if you want, the value to matter, which in many senses in modernity had been through a process of devaluation. We need to give the matter its once again. And that has been one of the, I think, major affiliation of Indian tradition in general, because when the environmental crisis was started to be recognized, some scholars, mainly the one that relates to the school of deep ecology, really blamed the Western anthropocentric perception of religion, of science, of modernity, as having a major role of this human nature separation or dualism, or the kind of perception that nature has only instrumental value to humans. And we're trying to look for different cultures that have non-anthropocentric perspective, or organize in a different manner the relationship between human and nature. And India, which is very well known, what is called the sacred geography, the sacred mountains or river, was highly served as a highly source of inspiration for the deep ecologist scholars. But that has also been this very delicate process of sanctifying the matter that we can find in many different Indian traditions, is undermined in when you have a lot of on one, of course, we want to progress and we want to have modernity, but seldom a lot of products are being implemented in an undeveloped matter. And I think the one interesting example can be seen in the work of David Aberman. He's an anthropologist, and he conducted a research on in the city of Vrindavan, which is located about 20 miles down the road from Delhi. And the Yamuna, and in the city of Vrindavan, the theology of Krishna is very central to the city. And what has happened in since the river started to be highly polluted, and what has happened to all kind of this, religious and cultural ceremonies. And this is what he says. Today, however, everything has changed. Nowadays, I personally would not even think of getting into the water as the same site where before I swam without concern. For today, the water flowing past Kashigat is black and full smelling. Many experiences become unrealizable when the physical means of access are blocked. In other words, the transcendent dimension of the goddess are reached through the immanent dimension of the river. If I can paraphrase Aberman's words, our conclusion is that a healthy river or a healthy ecosystem is an essential condition to maintain this very specific and very unique connection that was built, I think, for millennia in various different traditions in India between humans and nature. And we can see that instead of the beautiful Himalayan serene peaks, we have created anthropogenic mountains like Ghazipur, for example. And I remember that in 2019, there was a lot of comparisons were made in the newspaper comparing Ghazipur that is going to surpass the height of Taj Mahal. I think that the Ghazipur, I think, represent all the bad negative environmental aspects of this linear course of matter that we can see. But I also want to give another example of how waste has served as a focal point also for environmental justice and activism. And that is an example from the United States. For example, demonstration that started in Warren County in North California, an area, an agriculture area, but predominantly ruled by African-American poor families. And the government wanted to establish a toxic waste landfill in their area, and they have decided that they are going to protest. And for 4 years in a violent protests, they basically managed to change the decision and revert the decision and really fight for the right to live in their area and not to jeopardize their rural agricultural land and all the different water resources that they have. And I want to conclude, I think, with, I think optimistic example of how waste in right urban sustainability can create mechanism that we can inspire for social equity. And that happened in the city of Curitiba in South Brazil. Curitiba in the late 70s, early 80s was quite a very typical, very poor, highly polluted city in South Brazil. And Mayor Jimmy Lerner decided that he wants to transform Curitiba into the most sustainable city in the world. And he basically really managed to do it. And today, Curitiba considered to be one of the most, if you want, mecca of the urban sustainability, one of the most sustainable cities in the world. And what he have done when it comes, of course, there was a series of different decisions that were decided. But regarding to waste, one of the main things that they do is, first of all, that the residents will participate in collecting the garbage, and in turn of the waste that was collected, they received not money, but basically bus tickets to use in their bus rapid transit, highly sufficient, very cheap. Basically, if you compare it to the metro, for example, or any other mass transportation means, and created a series of effects that enabled for Curitiba finally to be a highly sustainable example for urban life, that created a much more equal environment. So we can see that the difference between the equal access to natural resources in the urban area managed to change and to motivate various different social phenomenon as well. And this is for me. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ricki. That was such a insightful presentation and a lot of food for thought. We can check if there are any questions from the audience. It's time to send that now. But in the meanwhile, I would just like to touch upon three key issues and examples from my own work before I get back to our speakers for today to hear their thoughts. I want to focus on the social, behavioral, and policy recommendations that we can draw upon from the examples that we have seen. And I'll add a couple of examples from my experience as well. So in terms of like social, we talk about cultural beliefs that people have, the religious attitudes that we've been carrying on from generations. And two areas that these emerge and I've seen in my work is with the informal economy and the role played by women in the sector, because waste is primarily a woman's job, a woman's responsibility. Even in high middle income households where you talk about composting, it's often the women who are responsible and who are tasked with the job of managing the waste. Interceding with that is the issue of caste, especially in the context of India, where the solid waste disposal as well as cleaning of toilets in our households is also undertaken by the lowest castes in our households, who don't touch any other part of your house if they enter your house. They're only meant to come and wash your toilets and then go out. So in this kind of an India where on the one hand, we are looking at examples of religious beliefs and religious attitudes, as well as philosophical ideas about what nature is, there are these social hierarchies along gender and caste lines, which divide how the work is done and how our attitudes are. And the other example that I wanted to share, which is also concerned with waste, is menstrual hygiene. use of sanitary pads and the environmental burden that it adds to because of women's use of sanitary pads, and then the onus being on women to pay more for sustainable options. So if you want to use biodegradable sanitary pads, for example, the onus is on the women in the household to ensure that they have more money to spend on these kind of pads. So it's not just a gender issue, but it's also economics and how money is spent within a household. Before I come to my third example, which is also related to social and behavioral, a small piece of formative research that I had done in 2019 before the pandemic began was related to child feces management, where we were talking to women about who in the household is responsible for managing the child's waste when it comes up. So the idea being that if you suggest any new intervention, it would be very gender inequitable in how the work is adding to the current burden that the woman has to do in terms of her daily activities. And there are several considerations to make, not just in terms of gender, but in terms of environment, and also to understand people's attitudes towards menstruation. Are they easily talking about menstruation? Are they easily talking about children's feces? One is both of them are harmless, biologically speaking, but children's feces do contain a lot of infectious bacteria, which do cause a lot of diseases in the community. Whereas the community believed that they were very safe because this is children hardly eat anything, so it's not going to spread diseases. Whereas menstrual blood, which is also considered to be very unholy in many parts of India and in South Asia and Pacific nations as well, are all related to the attitudes that we have towards these subjects, and as a result of which the waste that is generated within these domains also become taboo by being attached to the subject. So I just wanted to open perhaps to the three speakers today to reflect on and give your final closing remarks before we wind up for today's session, to this particular session. Shall I request Professor Neha to go first?
Sorry, so I just had a very interesting comment, because when you mentioned about the gender issues, I got reminded of my study that I did like maybe 7 years ago. It was on a very small rural population, where I noticed that it's basically the burden lies on the women. And then because I was a student of linguistics, I sort of analyzed the scripts that I obtained during the interview process. And I came up with a very interesting pattern whereby I noticed that the men of the community were using more of futuristic language. And because of that, because of the kind of language that they used, because they looked more towards the future, because they were sort of the bread earners of the society, they were looking at like maybe 10 years from now, 15 years from now, what happens to the society. And because of that, I guess they were not really too much into composting. But as compared to that, the women, they were not really using a more futuristic language, but maybe they were more interested in what happens to their family. How do they feed their family? Maybe if the next harvest season, they are not left with enough food. And because of that, they were actually into composting. So I wonder whether we should be looking at language in the future studies to see how that impacts our practices when we are dealing with composting or recycling. I mean, so maybe that makes a difference.
Thank you. Ricki, any reflections?
I wanted to ask Neha, please, because I think both of us kind of spoke about a little bit of a connection between religion and how religion can play a role in decreasing all the bad effects of waste. Is that if you see any difference between the different religion that you studies, or it seems to me, if I understood you right from the case study, that it was mostly a kind of an awareness, or a kind of maybe the religious sentiments that were mostly connected to the temple, or being close to the temple or the holy place that they were practicing, that increases their wish to recycle, but it didn't linger when they would, let's say, got back to their ordinary kind of behavior.
That's a very interesting question, Ricki. So I'm not sure because this is not my study, but then it seems from the comment that you are making, it is very much possible that they have been cued to do recycling activities when they enter this community place or when they enter this sort of place for worshipping. I'm not sure how, because the study didn't mention it. What were the long-term implications, like whether these people were also recycling outside the worship context? I'm sorry, I don't have much to comment on that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Professor Mimi, any final closing remarks on the social, gender, caste, and behavioral aspects that we've discussed so far? Any reflections?
Yes, to just reflect on what Neha was just mentioning about composting. This has also become a very prominent practice in Indian villages that they have started, that women have started composting, because men are, it's the taboo that the men are the bread earners and women are really taken into these kind of decision making processes. So women have by themselves started composting initiatives, and they have started generating employment for the family. So they have also started earning money by doing these kind of composting initiatives. So that's actually coming into the highlight right now, because they just started this something that they can do on the side. They didn't even imagine that that's going to bring money to their families, but that's what's happening. They're earning money from these composts. These are high quality composts which are again going to the organic farms. Government is buying it for the organic farms. Farmers who are into organic farming are buying it to use it for their organic farm. So you see, this is a cycle of progress that's going on here, and we just wish, and as you also said, Sneha, we just wish that women are brought into the mainframe of these discussions, because they are involved in a lot of these activities themselves. They are the victims of a lot of these kind of issues, and if they are brought into the mainstream discussion, I think it's only everyone is going to benefit from it. But in every field, you see, I work in agriculture, where I see women, though they are the unofficial, they're unofficially employed in agriculture. They're still not the formal sector of agriculture, but they do a lot of work in the fields. They are the ones who work probably as hard as their male counterparts, but they are not part of that formal sector. So it's only that it's only very important now that we bring women into the mainstream discussion, and let their opinions be heard also. Thank you. It was a really enjoyable session. Thank you so much, all the speakers here.
I would like to thank all of you for giving us your time on the weekend. And I hope you all stay for the remainder of today's sessions. We have a couple more exciting things coming up. Over to you, Ishan. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sneha, Neha, Ricki, Mimi. Thank you so much. I must confess that when we were planning this session, little did I know that we would be covering the length and breadth of sociology. We've talked about linguistics of it. We've talked about gender issues, religion issues, politics, economics, personal hygiene issues, health issues, age issues. And I'm sure that everyone watching us on YouTube, all of the students and our audiences would have enjoyed it as much as I have. So thank you so much. And we are delighted. And I'm sure this also session has shown us that we need to have a lot more of such conversations on all of these issues that we've covered, and probably more dedicated discussions going forward. Jindal School of Environment and Sustainability would be very keen on hosting such a session soon in the future. Again, thank you so much, all of you, for joining us. To all of our audiences, we, as Sneha mentioned, we still have a couple of sessions remaining, and we have since morning covered the morality of it, how environment came into being as a concept, what education does to it, as Ratsa mentioned, Justice Wilson. We've discussed the economics of climate change, the science behind it. And now, as I mentioned, we've had a bit of a potpourri of everything that comes within the sociological sector of waste and environment beyond. So the next is, how do you implement all of these things? Are there national agreements, international agreements? And that's our next session, where we discuss what Glasgow holds. And Glasgow, for those of you who do not know, is what is now being discussed under the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. That will happen exactly in the next 13 minutes. And I invite all of you to join us again. Till then, we'll have a bit of session break so that our panelists can breathe easy for a little while. And again, thank you for joining us, and thank you to all of our panelists. Thank you so much.